So something is happening in West Africa and we need to talk about it. On January 29, as you may have heard,
Hello, my great and wonderful people. We welcome you once again to our today's episode of this program. And today we get this video for our tip when episode one quickly we make you watch. One episode we received recently from David Hundeyin. Yes, I believe say all of us sabi this man, I still remember this man. For this recent time, we hear how it be say these three countries, which is Mali, Bokina Faso, and also Niger, when it be say they make a coup that time to exit their president when it dey under military regime, as we dey talk right now, they form coalition to break away from ECOWAS. As we dey talk now, they don't finally officially announce their own independence, which is in another word, they don't say a final goodbye to ECOWAS and their wahala. Now, David Hundeyin, for this very recent interview, come outside to review to us some deep things when it be say it dey underground within this three country, when it be say a lot of us not dey aware of. How it be say they take review some new passports different from the one of the general ECOWAS and so many other things. I bet pay attention to this video, although a long small, and I believe it will give you a lot of deep insight concerning what these people really stand for. I'll come back for more.
so something is happening in West Africa and we need to talk about it. On January 29, as you may have heard, the three countries making up the Confederation of Sahelian States, that's Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, officially exited ECOWAS. A few days after that, the news also came out that the French military has also started its full exit from Senegal. So the military base Marichal, the military base Saint Exupéry, and the military base Rear Admiral Protect have all been evacuated by the French and are now under the command of the Senegalese military. At West Africa Weekly, there are a couple of stories that we covered around this period as well, which I hoped would make probably more of an impression than it did in the public psyche. And I'll just quickly sort of list these stories out. So one of these stories was the launch of the new AES or CSS passports. So basically a common passport that links Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, while at the same time the decision was also made that notwithstanding, holders of ECOWAS passports, citizens from other parts of West Africa would still continue to enjoy visa-free access to the AES countries using the ECOWAS passports. Another story was the launch of a comprehensive integrated infrastructure plan straddling the three CSS countries. A comprehensive plan basically to link the economies of these countries by road, by rail, and other strategic infrastructure that needs to be in place for these three countries to effectively merge into one giant Sahelian economy. And then another story which I thought was significant that perhaps didn't get as much airplay as it deserved was also that these three countries are now in the planning stages of setting up a common telecoms provider, which would essentially link digital economies of all three countries, again, effectively turning three Sahelian countries into one giant juggernaut with over 70 million people and more than 50% of the erstwhile landmass of what used to be the ECOWAS region. Now, this is significant for two reasons. First of all, obviously, we are witnessing the birth of a new power center in West Africa. We're witnessing the birth of what could very well be a new sort of regional economic power in West Africa. Typically, or historically, it's been the case that the Sahelian states in West Africa have been significantly poorer than the coastal states in West Africa. That could be about to change, or that is in the process of changing. There's a fundamental economic reordering that we are witnessing. And then the flip side of that is that we're also witnessing potentially the fragmentation of West Africa into sort of parallel political and economic blocs, which is something that absolutely should not be the case, and which is something that absolutely did not need to be the case. Now, I think it's very well known that I have a certain set of positions about the current leadership of ECOWAS and the current direction of ECOWAS, and potentially the current agenda of the sort of international actor that seems to almost have an overwhelming influence over ECOWAS. These things are well known. However, that's not what this video is primarily about. Why this is a concern that I thought needs to be flagged is that, first of all, it is the case that we are witnessing this potential fragmentation of West Africa primarily because of the actions of ECOWAS itself. It was the actions of ECOWAS itself that led to the exit of these three countries from ECOWAS, and that effectively created a sort of fragmentation in West Africa, which was against the very basic foundational idea of what led to the creation of ECOWAS all those years ago. Bear in mind, ECOWAS, as it was originally envisioned, was meant to be a free trade area, was meant to be a free movement area, was meant to be a customs union, and was meant to be a monetary union. So essentially, it was supposed to be to West Africa what the EU is to much of Western and Central Europe. That's what ECOWAS was initially envisioned to be. That has not been the case over the years. And before I get to the events of 2023 onwards, I want to take this from a historical perspective. Now, for many years, I remember when I was a kid and I used to road trip around West Africa. It was the case that even though we were part of an ECOWAS, the actual logistical process of actually moving across borders was the most painful thing ever. And the simple reason for that was that the so-called ECOWAS passport wasn't actually launched until the year 2000. So for the longest period, ECOWAS was basically a free trade area without free trade and a free movement area without actual functional free movement across borders. This problem was finally, or purported to finally be solved in 2000, which is about 25 years after the launch of ECOWAS, right? Why that is an important piece of information is that it sets the tone for how ECOWAS has always handled issues. At its best, it has always been an absolutely elephant-paced organization. Now, from 2023, however, it took on a more sort of dangerous dimension from merely being an elephant-paced organization that perhaps wasn't moving quickly enough toward the convergence goals of West Africa, toward becoming something potentially even that some member states considered, dangerous or inimical, not just to their individual interests, but potentially even to the interests of a united West Africa or a united Africa, which ultimately is one of the goals of the AU's Agenda 2063. And this was what led to the fragmentation of ECOWAS and then the break-off of the three Sahelian states into what is now the AES or the CSS. Now, it must be said that it hasn't been all doom and gloom since 2023. Quite recently, for example, the new Ghanaian president, His Excellency John Mahama, the foreign policy body language that he has adopted toward the AES, where, if you recall, an invitation was sent out to the Bokina head of state, Captain Ibrahim Traore, who actually showed up at John Mahama's inauguration with much, the public attention that generated. And then even more significantly, in my opinion, the subsequent visit of the Malian Prime Minister to the Ghanaian capital and the sort of thawing, very, very visible thawing of diplomatic relations between Ghana and the the Alliance of Sahelian States. This has been a very consequential foreign policy decision that I think isn't just in Ghana's interest, but it's in the wider interests of West Africa as a whole. And that is definitely something that I think the John Mahama administration should double down on. Now, having said that, um, it would be, I think, intellectually dishonest to try to have this sort of conversation without confronting the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is that the thing I've been referring to as the actions of ECOWAS that led to the breakaway of these three countries to pursue their own common interests. These actions of ECOWAS are almost entirely foreign-driven actions. They're actions driven by a foreign actor, namely France. Now, I know I said at the outset that this wasn't going to be a video about France, and this wasn't going to be a video about criticism of the current ECOWAS leadership. However, it's very important to put these things down for the purposes of ensuring that the true situation of affairs is very clearly communicated. For those who perhaps have been living under a rock or who aren't aware of the exact set of circumstances that led to the exit of these three countries from ECOWAS, it wasn't just about the fact that the sort of the coup d'etats that brought the three military juntas of these countries to power were rejected by the ECOWAS leadership, and then there was military saber rattling. That was part of it. But the issue goes beyond that. The issue is more fundamental to, what makes up the very heart of ECOWAS. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it took just roughly 25 years for the ECOWAS passport to finally be implemented, something that was first envisioned in 1975. There are many other initiatives which remain in existence only on paper. So, for example, there is supposed to be an ECOWAS monetary union that was also envisioned at the start of the commencement of this organization in the 1970s. We're in the year 2025 now, and we're no closer to a common ECOWAS currency, a common West African currency than we were in 1975. It has simply not happened. And why has it not happened? And why have so many other progressive plans that were envisioned by the founding fathers of ECOWAS, why are these plans simply not happening? Why is there no movement toward these things? And the reason is that whether by reason of funding or for whatever imaginable reason that you may be able to come up with, it simply is the case that functionally ECOWAS, or at least the policy direction of ECOWAS, has been essentially hijacked by a foreign entity, and that foreign entity is France. The fundamental issue here is that ECOWAS, which purports to be an organization representing the convergent interests of West Africa, must consequently be an organization that acts exclusively in the interests of West Africa, exclusively on the initiative of its West African member states, and must act only in the shared interests of West Africa. Now, where those shared interests happen to come into direct conflict with the interests of an external entity such as France, which has managed to sort of become very prominent, not just in the day-to-day running or the policy making or the funding, but at every level of ECOWAS. What is supposed to be the case is that the interests of the region are supposed to take priority, are supposed to take precedence over the stated interests of the external actor, and that has not been the case. In 2023, for example, when the coup in Niger took place, and General Abdurrahman Chiani and his military council came into power, I think it was a very well accepted truth around the region that the fact that this was basically a bloodless coup, this was a coup that was very well received by the regular citizenry of Niger. This was not a coup that destabilized the country, and that Niger, by virtue of its location, is such a strategically located country that the potential of destabilization, based on its proximity to Libya and northern Nigeria and its ability to basically open the door to chaos to West Africa, meant that the best thing to do in that situation was basically to call it a win. So whether or not one agreed with there being a coup to take out what purported to be a democratically elected government, the point is it was not in the interest of West Africa to interfere at all. It was in the best interest of West Africa to leave it as is. And yet, all kinds of moves were made, even up to the point of actively attempting a military invasion of Niger. And all of this was done based on the say-so of an external entity. And that's the issue here. The issue is that the sovereignty of ECOWAS is central to not just the existence of the body, but the prosperity and the future prospects of the member states of ECOWAS. That's why ECOWAS exists. Where it appears to be the case that a foreign entity has effectively hijacked control over the prime institution representing the interests of West Africa, what would then necessarily happen is that either the entire institution gets destroyed, becomes a Rio Tinto Israel kind of situation, or a sort of rival organization, supranational organization, emerges to fill the space that has been vacated by an ECOWAS which is allowing itself to be puppeted by a foreign entity. And that's exactly what has happened with the emergence of the AES and the CSS. A lot of people, regular people in the region, still don't understand the significance of what has been happening. I still don't understand that this is not merely a political disagreement between heads of states. This is a fundamental difference in worldview between, essentially we are the same contiguous civilization across West Africa, but one power bloc within West Africa, which is the ECOWAS power bloc, is almost sort of becoming content to be subservient to an external power which is on another continent. And then another power bloc which is sort of more concerned with sovereignty and dictating its development on its own terms and its own economic prosperity. One of the big policy directions of the CSS or the AES bloc is to do away with the CFA franc and eventually come up with a common currency for all three countries, which would do two important things. First of all, it would entirely eliminate the control of France, the monetary control of France over these countries. And then more importantly, it would create a common monetary zone controlled by Africans in West Africa. So the regular people across the West African region and the leaders across the West African region need to understand now more than ever that what we are witnessing is an existential breakaway, so to speak, right? Well, maybe I shouldn't use the term breakaway because we shouldn't think of it as a breakaway, right? At the end of the day, we are all still the same people. We are all still trading with each other. We are all still visiting each other's countries. But there's a risk of it becoming a breakaway, right? And we've seen examples in the world of civilizations that used to be one contiguous civilization, which, due to external interference, have become, south this and north that, east this and west that. We don't want that to be the case in West Africa. It should never happen in the 21st century that because of foreign interference, be it from France, be it from whoever, that the interests of West Africa, which are meant to be protected and which are meant to be represented by ECOWAS, are being trampled on, or even the policy direction of ECOWAS is being influenced unduly or even determined by what some French government extension wants. That should never be the case. ECOWAS exists for West Africans. It doesn't exist for France or for anybody else, right? This is our home. This is where our ancestors lived and died. This is where we are living. This is where we will die. This is where our children will also live and die. We don't have any other place in the world. There's nowhere that we can go to where we will be welcomed. And that's why we set up ECOWAS in the first place. And that's why the three Sahelian countries have set up what they consider to be a worthy successor to the ideals that ECOWAS initially represented. And that's why we're at this crossroads. So at this point, it is imperative, it is important for those in charge of ECOWAS and across West Africa to understand that this is a choice between life and death, basically. It's a choice between economic and political sovereignty on the one hand, and total subservience and basically no future for our children on the other hand. Bear in mind that even now, even at in the infant stages of development that it's in, you can already see how the countries that have made the decision to chase their sovereignty are seeing some sets of results. We're seeing countries like Niger having double-digit economic growth. Niger for a while, between 2023 and 2024, was, I believe, the fastest growing economy in the world. This was a country which was basically putting itself together under all kinds of, crippling sanctions and, trade restrictions and border closures and everything, and was still able to put out that kind of performance, simply based off of the fact that it's, somewhat integrated with its Sahelian neighbors, and it simply just has ambition, right? That's what African countries are capable of when they center themselves and their interests, and not the interests of people from France or wherever. So it's important that the leadership of ECOWAS understands that, so that ECOWAS does not lose any more members, so that the region does not fragment any further unnecessarily, and so that both ECOWAS and AES or CSS can find ways to work together to bridge the differences between them. And even if they remain two separate supranational organizations, can make it such that the founding ethos of both organizations continue to be apparent in how they relate with each other. So in terms of trade, in terms of movement, and in terms of diplomatic and political relations, that needs to happen. Because if external interests from another continent succeed in politically balkanizing West Africa, then I think it's fair to say that the founding fathers of ECOWAS would basically have essentially failed, which I don't think is what anybody wants to see. So that's all.
All right, my great and wonderful people. I believe you don't hear the total breakdown of this whole thing of these three countries and their leaders when they see it, they take count upon themselves to see their people they free. All right, I'll leave you to share your own opinion with us in the comment section. For us, we're very happy for this three country, for the move when we see they take, and also the resilience to stand up to this very moment. We know say it's not that easy. They don't receive a lot of hits and they vow not to bow down. Yeah, now so freedom be. Freedom not they come in an easy way. No, everyone that desire freedom must pay one price or the other. All right. Share your own opinion with us in the comment section, even as we draw the line here. We will see you again when we see you. Remember, we love you. Bye-bye.